win.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. 3-0 predictions for SKT out the window right there. With RNG coming out. See ya. Get out of here. No, with RNG, though, I mean, it's coming out swinging here in Game 1, and it all started in Champ Select, securing Jace for Looper. And I got to say, based on the way Jace has performed in this tournament overall, I initially had some concerns around that pick, but he showed me with that first blood in the top lane.
I mean, SKT have blind-picked Jace twice on blue side. Spawn and Deficio were talking about this point. They have a real reason for doing that. And it comes actually back to the jungler decision or jungler pull and between Blank and Bengi that we were kind of speaking about earlier. If you have Jace, whatever the meta top laner, whether it's Kennen, whether it's Rumble, whether it's Poppy, you're going to be pushing in. You're going to have the aggressive. You're going to have control of the lane. Faker in the mid lane, whatever the matchup, has control more often than not. It's very easy to jungle when both your top and mid lane have pressure, get wards in. It papers over the cracks that were there during the regular season when specifically Bengi and Blank had to be accountable. The one game that SKT lost is when they had to respond to mid, when they had to pressure mid, when they were predictable. But I just feel like taking away the Jace really took away a lot of what SKT plays around.
I think taking away the Jace was smart, but I also feel like SKT does this in best of 5 sometimes, where they pick a very generic team composition in Game 1, look at the best punch from the enemy team, and if they beat that best punch, then it's a quick 3-0. So I think they definitely make some adjustments now. The Zyra is essentially the surprise that RNG threw at them, as well as some of the stuff they did in the mid game.
The only thing I would challenge in that analysis is that no matter whether it's Faker or not, if you play a Victor early game, the early game 1-6, which obviously we need to specify, is going to be lost. Later on, obviously, Faker had that wave clear, which was a major reason why they got back into the game. But yeah, Jace, power pick if he starts snowballing, and this is why we have so many questions around this pick, because when he loses hard. In the nature of that matchup, when he gets smashed versus Armor, everyone's like, why pick Jace?
We had that
if
one
only Hauser didn't pick Jace.
When he hits the second tier turret, we're like, that's why he picked Jace. It's just a video of him taking 75% of a turret's health in 6 seconds.
Yeah,
he pushes like no one else.
Right, and of course, with that first kill going on to Looper, it kind of unlocked RNG to really dictate the rest of the game. And this is where I want to jump into our first replay here. Mid lane gank by the bot lane duo translates into a 1-3-1.
So the focus here is not on the gank, guys, but something we want to highlight from the Descon is look at the lane assignments right after this gank. So we have Mana flashing in. He's going to get Faker's Flash and Ghost on cooldown. And then later on, RNG is going to do the following. They're going to put the Zyra, Rek'Sai, Jhin in the mid lane versus Faker, which means he is playing back versus Rek'Sai Q, Jhin W, he's under pressure. They're going to put the Jace in the bot lane, who has a really good 1v1 versus Ezreal, and then they send Vladimir to the top lane against the Poppy, who just bought armor.
Yeah,
this doesn't result in much, but it's a 20-second window where they can then take advantage of.
Exactly, and the window happens because everyone in SKT then says, what is RNG doing? We actually have to match this. They're switching to a 1-3-1. 11 minutes into the game, and it didn't seem like they'd done much of that, but then eventually they got a 2v2 in the top lane, which allowed them to teleport into that lane with the Jace and get another kill. So RNG not only brought a little bit of a different champ select, but that strategy they pulled off between the 11 and 20 minute marks definitely caught SKT off guard.
And the reason why you kind of heard Spawn talking about the surprise factor is it was a multi-step plan. You saw the wards down to bring up the safe 1-3-1. RNG have definitely gone for what you would call the very overly risky plays in the regular season in China. But the multi-step plan orchestrated there is the sort of thing that SKT are known for. And it's really good to see because it's something that they're going to need to definitely bring back in this series.
Yeah, it's something that gets so easily spotted when you're watching a whole game. But those particular lane assignments just made so much sense. You know, the magic damage into the armor, it just forces your enemy to make a recall. Also, you center your support and your jungle in the mid lane very early. They can move into the enemy jungle, you know, place some wards down. They did eventually switch back Jet from the 1-3-1 because they went for that play in the top lane. I believe we have the second replay right there. It's actually super smart setup because we were wondering why are they not sticking to the 1-3-1 because RNG was, again, one step ahead of us.
Right, let's take a look at this adaptation made by RNG, brought to you by Acer from that 1-3-1, setting up a sweet TP gank here in the top lane.
Yeah, I jumped the gun and talked about this earlier, but when they matched up with the 2v2 in the top lane, it's an easy recall for Looper. He can buy items, and they have the ward there as they're getting pushed in the top lane. So it's actually a pretty easy conversion. A nice start there by Uzi to get the root onto Bang early, and there's not too much they can do to escape here. They throw in the ultimate from the Jhin, land a few shots onto Wolf, get that kill, and this then transitions to the turret. Also, what is Duke doing completing that TP?
And, you know, talking about Duke, you know, he was playing the Jace, and his KDA on those Jace games, it wasn't wonderful. There was a 0-4-5 game there where he was kind of just being ganked by 4 members while the rest of his team were winning. The thing about Duke that's always been true of him, whether he was on Najin, when he was on SKT, he's not Marin. He's not a fantastic teleport user. And when you pick Poppy, especially into Jace, you're sacking lane. You're not expecting to win or get kills. We saw some of those from Cuve yesterday. That was certainly not the norm. You need to make the teleports work. And that was one example of a teleport that didn't work. We saw another one where he tried to catch off MLXG on Rek'Sai. That was just never going to work. The spotlight was on Duke and his teleport play, and he let his team down.
And I'm so pleasantly surprised by RNG because one of the critics we have very often of them is that they don't have macro. And they showed in the 10 to 20 minute mark 2 plays that were obviously set up very well. Like it all tied together when they did the lane assignments. This gank was pre-planned. That ward was there. And then even going back to the early phase of the game, they had the Zyra push very early on. They had their jungler group. They took that first tier 1 tower, and then they kept changing up the map, isolating outer turrets over and over, allowing this Jace to start snowballing. So this was such a smart play by RNG, and we're not used to seeing that. And this makes the series much more interesting.
It makes it much more interesting, but while they made some good moves in the early game, that did not mean that this game came easy for them. The ultimate victory took a while to get to, culminating in our game-winning team fight, but this was not before SKT made a couple very good moves themselves to even up the gold.
Because coming into this replay, SKT had really stalled out the game. We're like, okay, another late game, Bang's going to take it over. But then we see this big fight that really changed the course of things.
Xiao had just completed Death Cap before this fight as well, so him being able to get the angle while SKT was trapped in River is a big miss. And yes, Duke could have knocked back Uzi, but that wasn't going to stop Lupa from coming in the backside of this fight. This was a well-orchestrated fight by RNG to close out the game.
Again, they push out, they leave some D-Vision, and they always find good TP wards for Looper, and Looper is actually a top laner that is really good at those teleports, in my opinion. I have more of a utility vibe with him, so it was really nice to see that he could carry. But we have to mention the kind of late game macro, the closing ability of RNG was still lacking. They didn't go for deep vision when that tier 1 tower was still alive, and they had a hard time fighting against Faker's wave clear.
And I think you see that in the gold graph right there. They had the giant lead at 25 minutes. That evaporated by 37 minutes, and that's actually when you expected SKT to come back. But the double Mountain Drake, the Infernal, the poor positioning by Duke, RNG was able to extend their lead and win.
You've always asked analysts, how do you beat SK Telecom T1? And the story's actually always been the same. Take it to them in the early game, get a big lead, and also, if you can find a way to have a better late game team fighting against a team that can pull it to late, those are your 2 options. RNG did both.
I mean, the damage statistics as well, they were very interesting because both Faker and Bang, they're topping the charts, of course, while Poppy is expected to take a back seat, whereas RNG had a bit more of an even, cut for their team.
Yeah, and I like the even spread, and I think you can even simplify the 2 ways you try to beat SKT. You either attack Faker or you play around Faker. And in a sense, RNG did a small amount of both. They mostly played around him by taking both the side lanes and focusing on that early. But they also attacked him occasionally in the team fights by trying to use that extended advantage on him.
Yeah,
I think, go for it.
Yeah, we just shouldn't put all the blame on Duke, though, because there was that one phase in the early game where Faker went for a kill attempt on Mata. Mata used Flash, but then he got picked out. It's that kind of momentum that you can't afford to lose if you're SKT. They did a phenomenal job punishing the lack of warding from RNG, though. The fact that they got it back to even is worrisome for RNG farther in this series, but it's still like RNG with that Baron call closed it.
And I definitely don't think it's all Duke's fault. You look at the lead at the beginning, that was the 2v2 and 2v3 in the bottom lane that went going. And we talk about the jungler being a weak spot for him. Bengi was a non-factor on Lee Sin, not to mention blind picking Lee Sin into Rek'Sai when he's available. Not good choices there in the draft phase or even in the game.
And we'll discuss this on the other side of the break, but Blank will be subbing in for Bangy. Now the quarterfinal clash between SKT and Royal Never Give Up continues right after this break.
We're going to bring you this best-of-5 quarterfinal between LCK's SK Telecom and LPL's Royal Never Give Up. Hold that thought. Duke's in trouble. 100 HP. Lupa solo kills. Gone are the days, my arse.
Oh, this is good. This is
now
really
they're
good.
going for it. Look at the minimap. SKT are nowhere near.
Just finish it.
Dragons in the pit. RNG, they've stolen it. They've snuck it. They've got Baron. And Royal Never Give Up strike down the defending world champion.